Thanks, everybody. Thanks for attending. And a special thanks to JG. Always good to see him and to play with his bicycle. But today we're going to be focusing on the essential concepts, but the last one is going to be for the data executive. So how would the data executive go about justifying this to the organization? So I'll actually show you some different areas over here, but what I do want to say, and I can see there are quite a few, I think there are quite a few people from Saudi Arabia. I see May, and I saw Tamim and Ahmed and stuff like that. So this is, I think you guys will get a lot out of this. This is part of that data value realization domain that the NDMO has put forward. And it's basically saying that all of the ministries have to look at realizing value from their assets. And I really like the framework that they put together. There's some areas that we can enhance on, but they've done a great job in saying and focusing everyone in terms of saying, get your value sorted out and start to define your value. Now, what is interesting, and JG and I were chatting about it yesterday, is that they also have open data. So all ministries, there's a thing there saying open by default, and certainly their fundamental data will be open by default for people to use. But then how do they build data products on top of open by default? How do they add extra value that they can start charging for, generating revenue, reducing costs, and things like that? So I'm going to use the framework. I hope that everyone enjoys it, because it's certainly given me, I've had to do it for one of my customers, and I had to go through every single thing, making sure that I understand how to deliver. Of course, I think there's something like 13 or 11 specifications. We only need to do 3, but I've tried to do the whole lot for now, just for me to get an understanding of what's required. Okay. But all the others that of course, the Saudi NDMO is not applicable to all of us, but I think it's a great framework and we can all use it. And it's nice to have that sort of recipe or specification for us to do, because the DMBOK doesn't have it. The DMBOK only talks about it in a couple of places. In BI, it refers to data products. In data governance, it refers to data valuation, but that's about it. And we know, and I've been embarrassed quite a few times with Mr. Douglaney to realize that I haven't been doing this, I haven't been focusing on, and that was certainly my driver to say, get yourself sorted out, get your learning, get up to shape with this thing, and let's start going. So because we've done the essential concepts so many times, I'm not going to go through everything in detail like I did the first time, but if you'd like me to just share some things with you, please stop me and just ask for a little bit more detail. Okay, so right in the beginning, we said the trends, analytic trends that will dominate 2022. And the one that's sitting there is accurately valuing data products, which is fantastic for me. This is sort of, I really love this thing where Doug is saying the same thing. People are saying we got to get going on this thing. And of course, what he's saying is, what Doug Lane is saying is, the greatest success for a CDO is when they actually productize or commercialize their data in some way. Okay, so it's not just about business process optimization, doing BI and making sure we're more effective on our processes and things like that. It's more than that. It's about developing the products and having some form of commercial delivery on that. Okay. We also mentioned this about baking it into existing products, and I constantly use modelware as a set of examples. So yes, modelware's got training. Debbie shared that with you. We're doing data management for certification. We're doing data architecture, how to analyze data, which is BI and big data. Now, how do I bake the data into those training products? Okay, and that's been the revelation for me, is don't just sit there and just focus on your core products. How is the data, and how can you make use of the data to enrich your offerings and draw your customers in and connect a lot more And it's that next one statement over there, which is leveraging the value of its data to connect with the customer. So we have a big thing in Modelware to say that we customer first, and we want to support the customer. Now, this data helps us with more and more options in supporting the customer. Okay, we can analyze what are their skills, what are their capabilities, where do they need to be. And as part of the essential concepts, I've shared this with you right in the beginning. I like this focus on data value realization, the strategy and execution. And you can see here with the NDMO, they've got the 11 specifications. So what we have to do is we have to define use cases that realize value. We have to build a realization plan. We have to understand our pricing schemas. How would we calculate the prices? What is our charging model? And then generating revenue. This is a request submission. So in this case, the ministries would have to apply to send it to the NDMO to say, this is how we're going to generate revenue. That probably won't be applicable to anybody else other than the ministries in Saudi Arabia. And once we've got that going, then we start executing on then how do we monitor and do the maintenance and what the KPIs are. Okay. All right, so nice framework. This is the framework that, well, this is the playbook that I've been sharing you with, and it's a really helpful part of it. A lot of it's been handled by the data manager and the data citizen, and it's now up to the data executive to sell this to the business, to say, are you in agreement we should be doing this? Do you find that it's valuable to the business? They have to convince the business and the execs. And I think a lot of the times they'll be convincing their customers to say, this value that this data has is very beneficial to you, and this is how you can use it. So it is, I find that it's the executive that's going to take the driving or the leading steer in this and creating the awareness and making sure that everybody understands. So at a high level, you want to, as far as your data products, you want to understand where you can position the value, where about on the customer journey map, how would you measure the value? You then look to discover value. So what data has value? If I look at all the data that I'm collecting, everything from attendance to certifications to assessments to knowledge collection definitions to asset vaults, things like that for professionals, how can I collect this data and help people do what they need to do in the jobs that they need to get sorted out? All right, so we then go into the discovering the value, what can we add, then agreeing how we're going to price it and agreeing how we're going to measure the value. And I like this one in terms of, it certainly got me to think about when I talk about all sorts of things, where am I referring to? Am I referring to usage, product usage? How many customers have we got? Now, there's always a challenge of, well, if I got 100,000 free customers and only 20 paying customers, then I've got a bit of a challenge. And how do we convert them now into paying customers? So we have to define how we're going to put measures of our value that we give to the customers, and then how we're going to calculate it. Once this is agreed, we start building the platform. And we had a nice session with Don on Monday, I believe it was, and Don showed econ data and what platform they have with the data catalogs and everything like that. Now, of course, this is going further and further with when you have data as a service. Lots of the big companies, Microsoft, Azure, all these types of things, they are providing the infrastructure for data as a service. So you're going to have to be asking yourself, do we do it in-house? Do we do it on one of the cloud systems? Where do we position all of this information, and how do we get the data moving backwards and forwards? So high level one, you'll find if you go through all the different slides, you'll see all this if you need to catch up and look at these areas. Okay, now as the fundamental part of a data product, it's all about understanding the data value chain. So what value can I produce the customer? Okay, so you're certainly not going to be able to convince the business that you've got this amazing value chain and stuff like that if you can't demonstrate the value that you can present to your customers, and are they willing to pay for it? And at a very high level, it's all about collecting the right data. It's about creating the insights. For example, we have learning progress. So how fast is your learning progress? What are you battling with? Are you battling with data modeling? Are you battling with data quality? Where do you want to be from a career point of view? What are the next learning elements that you can perform? And so we would then build these insights on your progress of learning, on your development. Okay, so we also then, at some stage, I introduced what I call the KSCA competency model, which is getting lots and lots of focus at the moment. And it's all about saying, what knowledge do I have? What skills have I got? Then I know how to do something. What competencies do I have, which is a group of all these things. And then what attitudes are important to do a data strategy, for example, or to do a data product, or to do change management. What are the appropriate elements that I need? So we would then, using all this data, we create the insights, and then we've got some of the insights. Now we want to create the value. And the value is when we finally deliver this information and knowledge to our consumers, and we start dealing with the areas of their jobs to be done. So what is it, for example, what is it that a data professional needs to do that can spend hours on? And if any of you guys are like me, the next minute I get a tender, then I have to build a CV, and then we start from the beginning again, creating all this information and building a CV. Or they want a portfolio, they want to see what work I've done, what templates have I created. So I keep on going through this process of constantly regenerating CVs, portfolios, and things like that. Now, in my case, it can get quite complicated. So I could be asked to do a data governance job. I could be asked to do data architecture, data modeling. I could be asked to do data quality or metadata. And each time I have to build a CV that talks to what they want, not what I want or what I've done for 30, 40 years, but what is it that they want and how am I going to help fix their problem? And so this is where a professional spends some time, and that's the job to be done. They got to do this. I see there now, Rob's asking, do you tag the data to reflect which business entity utilizes the value and values the data, or does the data only have value once productized? Oh, that's a, and I then saw JG's 100 years, check there. Rob, there's several different, when I talk about that value taxonomy, there's several different ways of defining value. Some value could be commercial value, and then what you're talking, that last element is it's only got value once I'm able to sell it, and once I'm able to create a revenue stream out of that. That's when my data gets value. But we may also have scenarios where we're exchanging data, and for the exchange of the data or some of the process that I'm doing, everybody else can get some value, and they'll give me some kickback on the other side. Okay, so yes, it's actually quite interesting when you get involved in data catalogs. Some of the elements on a data catalog is when you add all of your data assets to a data catalog. So a lot of the times you can actually add a pricing taxonomy to that data catalog. So you can actually say, well, at this time, this was the deemed value of it, who's using it, and so yes, you would add some tags to the data, and then of course you're going to manage and understand the sharing. So, for example, in BI and big data, and when we develop a time series, we would then monitor how many times people are consuming our data, and then constantly check if that is delivering the value that they are asking for. Rob, did that answer your question?
Thank you. I also, the reason why I asked it is because of and I think you kind of addressed that said, where you have silos in organizations, I mean, the data can be of value to multiple silos without them knowing it.
Yes, yes.
So when you're developing a data product, for example, there may be more beneficiaries than perhaps the one that you're actually engaged with.
100%. You certainly have that. I mean, I remember building a data catalog for one of my customers, and right at the end, it was actually for a data quality exercise. And right at the end, people, one of the most amazing comments that came out of it was, "Wow, I never knew we had that data, and I didn't know that this department had the data, and that was probably the biggest experience that we got out of a data quality thing. So yes, it is important to, within the data catalog, within those assets, to be able to associate tags, as well as what Mark is saying, you know, what was the data lineage? How do you link all of these metadata elements to the data product itself, so that people can get an understanding of its quality and the frequency of its updates and elements like that. So yes, and you do find yourself creating quite a few surprises on the way. So what I did was, I like this data product structure, understanding how I can deliver data products. And for example, this is something that Infotech put together. I like what they've done. There's a data product at the detailed data service. There's a data product at an aggregated level where we aggregate the data. We can then visualize it. So some people would just like to see the time series, or they would like to see a dashboard or elements like that, or they'd like to see a comparison, an infograph, and then you've got the further insights. Now, for example, when we talk to the ministries, that detailed data service, just the data that they have and they've collected, that's a good one for open data. Okay, so you could have a lot of this data from an open point of view. Where you have to be careful of is having customer data in there or citizen data in there, and then you're going to have to DID that, or you're going to have to reduce some of those elements on the data. So you may need to, in some cases, have to roll it up to get that aggregation level and then remove the details of the data privacy elements. Okay, but so you can go on about building it, and this is sort of what we're trying to do is, what is our foundation data at the detail, and then how do we aggregate it to get more and more value? I think this is important as a CDO who will be sharing it with his business to say, these are the opportunities that we have to create data products. Okay. And then within a data product, we can have multiple use cases, and I'll share a little bit with you over there. So basically the structure of a data product, we have external data providers, people coming from here. We have data consumers, which is the people that are actually going to pay for the data. And of course, some of them may be getting it free. And then we've got the different layers. The detailed data is all the fundamental. Then we aggregate the data. We can aggregate it for comparisons, for weighted averages and generalization. We then go into the visualizations, infographics, trends, things that people can read and understand or look at. And then we go into the insights, findings, and advice, where you look at patterns and you start having more deep discussions about what this means and where the business is going. Now, I am ignoring all of these other areas, right? The data sharing agreement and how do we build a data catalog that people can discover our data products? To your question, Rob, one of the important things, you almost have to have a Google of your data so that people knowing very little can navigate your data and find the data. And without tagging, people really can't find it as well as they should be able to. And then on the far side, we have value-added data products coming in. We've got external data. So we could be bringing data in from econ data as an example, and we can be linking it to our balance sheet as JG would like to do it. And now we can say, well, this is how you compare across in the economy and elements like that. You can do these merging of the data and mashups. And of course, underneath it is the ownership and governance framework. But I'm not going to get into that now. It's all about convincing the business that we can make money, and there's money to be had and costs and improvements. Okay, so this was the valuation playbook. I'm not going to get too involved with that. Once you've defined the data product and you know exactly how you're going to use it, then it's about building the ecosystem that's going to share it, and it's establishing that framework. But at the same time, when you're identifying these data products, you want to be doing a feasibility study. So which ones should we better get going first? What is our prioritization? How do we prioritize this information? Okay, now this deck contains a whole lot of other stuff. There's a nice paper on the different building a data value chain, the valuation terminology, using a customer journey map to understand how they go, all the different value realization traps that you can fall into, And then this is more from a modelware point of view or a training point of view, the competency models, but also the business process optimization. So this is going to be key for you. One thing is generating revenue, but there's also cost reduction. So I'm going to go through this just a little bit to be able to say it's based under this term called value engineering. How do we create value? How many slides does Howard Diesel have? I think it's in the region of 150, 160 at the moment, Mark. But you guys can work through that. I'm certainly not going to take you through that. So we've got two things of increasing value, improving function, doing the jobs to be done so that we can, it's 150 in this deck. And then reducing the costs. So how do we eliminate waste? And there's three areas to eliminate waste: business process effectiveness, risk management, and success factors and change. All right, so the important thing is, how do we have numeric measurement of this, of the business process optimization? That's all that's important here. These are the different vectors that you can improve either your effectiveness, risk management, or success. Now, what's important here is you've got to have this taxonomy in here so that you can price it properly. And I'll show you some of the challenges when you get involved with that. Okay, so this is just here's a paper of someone that did a great job of giving me a complete scope of how I would define my cost reduction. Okay, I need a formula, I need a way, I need a framework of defining and recording cost reduction. So here is the paper here, if you guys are interested. And basically what he's saying is business process effectiveness contributes 57%, risk management 19%, and success and change management contributes 24%. So those are basically the structure that you can work on. Okay, so these are all just different success factors, and what's the definition of a success factor. Okay, all right, so now let's go to the CDO. Okay, now the CDO's got this job of, everyone's got so excited, we built all this stuff. Data democratization, not right now. We can certainly make use, Rupesh, we can certainly make use of the data platform to allow more and more access to people, consumers, that we can reduce the barriers to access of the data. But that's not something that I'll cover today. Sorry about that. Okay, so now this is quite an interesting thing that Infotech did. I was quite fascinated by it. I think it's obvious. I believe it's obvious, but basically what they've worked out with a whole lot of surveys and stuff like that is to say information management departments that understand business needs provide more value. Okay, so this is a simple linear regression model, and this is what they've done in terms of the survey. And basically what they're saying is the more you understand their needs on the scale of 1 to 10, the better your value is. Okay, so we owe it to our business, we owe it to our customers, that the more we understand about their business and their customers and how to produce value for them, the better we will work with our business, and the better information management value we will produce. Okay, so I did like that in terms of just trying to express to our executives how much they need to focus on the business and not just the technology and all the fancy stuff that comes around with information management. You don't really need to do that. I feel a lot of the times if you're discussing how you're going to produce value for them and reduce costs, either by revenue or cost reduction, I think you've done a lot and you're progressing far. Do you need to talk about data quality, master data, metadata? Not really, unless they want to, unless you're progressing and they become inquisitive, or they want to understand how it works. Okay. The other one that is important is risk in the data economy. I think there's a lot of risk here that we can't go into without a good understanding. Everything from cybersecurity to privacy protection to other people that you don't really own the data. The data is owned by the individuals. And how can we work together with these individuals to produce more value? So we have this scenario that I did mention it in one of the talks called the data stockfell, where you could create a data infrastructure for those people with their data. Some people can ask for it, and you would this community would then charge the researchers for the data that they'd like to have about that area. Okay, so you got to be careful of that. This is not just let's just run, and we have to be very controlled. We have to put in the impact assessments, privacy, ethics. All of these things have to be part of that this planning mechanism that we're talking about. Okay, so let's go a little bit into this data value realization that we have, the framework that we've set up. And I just want to share with you a spreadsheet that they've got, and it's actually quite nice when you have to adhere to a certain level of specifications. This is an example of the specifications that the NDMO has described. And so they've got these domains, controls, specifications, and deliverables, and then also priorities. Okay, so you can see here when I release them all, there's everything from BI to data catalogs, classification, governance, operations, quality, sharing, all the things that we've been talking about. But the one I want to focus on today is this data value realization. How do we convince our business that we can make value? And if you look at the priority one, it's really focusing on these two areas over here. It's saying that we need to be able to convince the organization and describe data revenue generating use cases, okay, and cost saving use cases. So how would I describe a cost saving use case? That would be if I have a business process and it takes me 5 days to build a portfolio of evidence for a professional, and my data product can reduce it to 1 day, or I can automate it all, then I've saved 5 days. So that's a cost-saving use case. Now, what I am finding in some cases is that the same use case does two things. It generates money and it saves. So one has to be a bit careful when you're doing your numbers to justify that. Rob, your question is, do you know of companies who have appointed or created a role of a data lawyer? Yes, Rob, I do. Now, what we're finding is that the biggest driver has been privacy, and you'll find a lot of lawyers are focusing on data privacy. Weber Wenzel, for example, in South Africa has become one of the leading attorneys and focusing on data privacy. So yes, there are certainly elements. Now, when I did my first data privacy exercise 3 years ago, interestingly enough, I walked around with a lawyer. Together we walked around and looked at all the data, and then he had to study the contracts to say, okay, what did we commit to the contract to the customers, and do we have to rewrite the contract? Okay, so certainly lawyers are operating more and more in this area, and then of course we have sort of internal audit, and when they find something funny, they would go with the lawyers and try to reduce that. But legal firms are taking the lead on this data privacy, certainly in my experience. So we had the cost savings and the revenue generation use cases. So for each revenue use case, data value realization use case, the entity shall estimate and document the projected payback and return on investment. And this is the crux of what the data executive has to do. Is, yeah, we got all these fancy ideas and that, but what is the projected payback and what is the return on investment? And remember, when we did that data value realization traps, one of those career limiting moves is, and bad business cases is when you suggest that you're going to make all sorts of money and nothing pays out anywhere near what you suggested in your project plan or in your business case. So this is a tricky one. You can overshoot it, you can estimate badly, and you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. Okay, and the next element that they have is then build a roadmap, then get the action plan of use of people and projects, and start delivering that. Now, that's a lot of that is just typical project management type of scenario. So those are the first two priorities, and then just to keep going a little bit more, if we look at all of them, we've got next step is doing the pricing scheme, the pricing calculator, the charging model that we're going to charge people for. Then we'll go into requests for revenue generation. This I don't think is applicable to most of us. Only the Saudi thing where they have to submit this to the NDMO and we have to have all these details. Then we have the use case monitoring and maintenance. And you can see these are the things that they're expecting on monitoring, and then the KPIs. Okay, how many data products have you developed? Now, these are good metrics, guys. These are metrics that any CDO that's building data products should have. And I see these as the sort of just almost the data product growth rate. How many products have I developed? What's the revenue generation? What's the total number? What's the total cost saving? What's the payback period? And what's the return on investment? So this is the framework that we're working on. Okay. All right. So that's the playbook. That's what we've got to get through. Now I've summarized these specifications to make them a bit more readable. We've got to develop a use case, our use case registry. We have a realization plan. We have pricing schemes, pricing calculators, charging models, generation requests, monitoring and maintenance, and KPIs. And these are the deliverables. Now, I've got the strike through here in PowerPoint just to show you what I've done within the Excel spreadsheet that we'll share with you. This is my Excel spreadsheet that we've got. And you can see here, there's actually a use case register, and we'll take you through this use case. So my first use case for modelware is I want to be able to provide, using this data product, I want to be able to produce a portfolio for the professionals, or I want to be able to produce a CV. My charging model would be consumption-based. My pricing strategy is value-based. This is my value proposition, and I'll take you through all of these different sections as we progress. And this is basically your entire definition, almost the request that you would be submitting to the NDMO to provide them with the information. Okay. All right, so these are the type of things that you have to do as an executive to go through it. You have to do this preparation. Okay, so before you want to stand in front of everybody, you have to get this thing sorted out. Now, exactly what pricing model and pricing scheme you would use, you probably are going to be talking to your marketing people, getting an understanding of how to price it, or trying to find an existing person that's pricing it in a similar way. Okay, so this is at a high level what my use cases are. I have two use cases here just to demonstrate. What goal is this use case trying to achieve? Okay, so in this situation, we're trying to create an asset vault for our customers, for the professionals. So every piece of work that they do, for example, this presentation, I can put it into the Howard Diesel Professional Data Vault, Asset Vault. Then when you want a portfolio, I can say, okay, here's my portfolio that I've done on productizing data. And people can look at it and they can understand what value I've contributed or how well I understand the topic. Okay, and in that, the important elements are, there's the use case, there's the goal, there's the charging model, how are we going to charge for it, and then what is our pricing scheme? Okay, this is important in terms of the scenario. Okay, yeah, so yeah, if we can put all of the data product variables in that way, and what I did want to share with you is, of course, we remember last week we spoke about the data value chain. So this is not the same. Please don't get it confused. I had a data value chain here where I spoke of competencies and elements like that. Of course, there's lots of data I'm going to use here, but this is more about describing the value chain of the data. This one is about the use case and describing to the business how I'm going to produce value. Okay. So we do our first one. We have a list of all the possible use cases. We have to convince our business that we're going to create value at this level. All right. And then when we go to the next step, we're getting into the different charging models and pricing schemes. And here's a list of, if you guys are interested, you'll be able to find it. I've got what's called a pricing model, a modelware data pricing calculator. So just to show you what this is about, you can choose any one of these options. Okay, which is the exact one? I think you have to play around with a few different possibilities and see which one works for you. So here's a competition-based pricing. Basically what that's saying is, what are other people charging and what am I charging, and what is my reduction on other people? I've got less 300 Rand, and I've gone for a lower than the competition. Okay. All right, so then I can go into cost plus pricing. I can go into freemium, and here's a definition of the freemium model. So how many free users do we have? What is the upgrade from free to paid? And what is the projected number of updated users? And then what would the projected revenue be? I've got to get to that revenue projection for the first year. That's critical for me to do the return on investment. Okay, do I use an hourly pricing model? Now, data products, not normally hourly unless I'm providing some form of service. So this is more appropriate for consultants and contractors, skimming. So what they do is they come in at the highest level, and then they start to, it's almost like this race to zero as they talk about, and and they keep on reducing the price as we have other competitors coming in, or as we understand what sort of what value we're producing. So they go in big and then they start reducing it. We've got premium pricing, we've got project-based, and then we've got value-based. And a lot of my times I've used the value-based pricing in that scenario. Okay. All right, so now going back. Okay, so you're going to have to go through this. You're going to have to work out what is the right calculator for your data product. Are there any questions there? Is everyone following? JG?
I mean, Howard, I think it's quite important just to land the context of you swapped, the data value chain
Yes.
and the value to the business.
Yes.
Jumping between pricing models is it's quite difficult to take your business along with you, because what you're actually doing here is you're substantiating to your sales team how you're planning to bill it.
Well, so what I'm trying to do here, JG, is build the business case. So if I look, I've got to get this right before I can do my business case calculations in terms of what's the revenue that I can get in the 5 years, what's my payback period for investment, projected payback and return on investment.
So can I just confirm context then is, if that's the case, it means that this is not, this diagram we're looking here, this is back office work. This is not what you're envisaging presenting to your board to get 100%. Consensus, right? So sorry, then cool. Then I missed that piece. So I just want to be clear on this, is that we've got a data value chain where we are looking through the I think it's the KCS model, that exposes an opportunity. Then I take the opportunity and I start walking it through this business case justification, but I'm not yet presenting to anybody because I'm going to have knock-on effect. Correct. That I need to still. Okay, cool.
Yeah, you got it. I mean, that whole pricing strategy, and I'm assuming not many CDOs have a good understanding on how to build the pricing strategy, but that choice of pricing strategy is really important. And you would be talking to the marketing people or those people that have typically done your pricing on your product and say, well, what sort of pricing approach can we use on our existing customers? So, for example, if we've got, this is the way I see it for Modelware, if we're doing training and I want to bake this data in, and I want to then be able to say to them, oh, right, I can provide you some added value in terms of creating a CV. How would I do it? And for me, it would be, it could be linked into that primary product, or I could say this is consumption based. So each time you ask for a CV, I can generate the CV. How many hours have you spent learning? How many certifications have you got? What assessments have you passed? So it depends on I have to decide how to charge that customer. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but it does now. But I felt that was maybe a bit quick for me, because okay. every pricing. So as soon as you go into a pricing model, you actually need to go link it back one-to-one to the proposed value proposition.
Yes.
And there might be more than one in a use case.
Yes, correct. So if So when I had this one, I jumped across. There's my value proposition that I got from the value chain. Okay, better competency management, which is your KSCA. That's for modelware training. Now, within that, I've got a value dimension of I can produce economic value, and I can either be looking at revenue generation or cost reduction. And in my cost reduction, I've got the time saving, attract new customers, and better service delivery. Does that answer your question? So that's
yeah, but then you almost need to attract each of these could get a different pricing strategy.
Yes.
So I guess where I got confused is I was coming into the pricing strategy looking at the entire green board, but actually there's a pricing strategy at a line level here.
Yes, correct, 100%.
Okay, cool.
Sorry.
Thank you.
It is part of use case 1, and for each of those line items that I've got over here, revenue generation, cost reduction, stuff like that, I may have a different pricing model.
Cool. Thanks for clearing that up. Appreciate it.
And especially when you're doing cost reduction and you're going back to internal funny money charging within the business, it's a case of, well, what sort of model do I use there in that scenario? Would it be a consumption based? So each time that someone in your department may have had to build a special portfolio for a professional, what does it normally take you? Oh, I can now reduce by 4 hours, and then I'll only charge you each time you use it. Does that? Okay. Thanks, JG. Thanks for asking that question. It is important. So the next thing that we have to get into grips is, as we said, is doing the pricing. And this is, of course, it's preparing your data so that when you present to the board and you say, these are all the products and these are the use cases and this is the feasibility, this is my roadmap, it's almost at that level, but you're going to have to come down to what is my revenue, what is my projected payback, and what is my return on investment. That's what the FD is going to be asking you. Okay. All right, so this is how we start defining the value. Once I've done the value, I've now got to, for every single one of those areas, I've got to look at the units of measure. So for example, for the first one, it was competency hours. The unit of measure is hour. The second one was time saving. So what I'm saying here is that I know the amount of time it takes me sometimes to do build a Power BI model for someone in terms of their learning and look at things like that. That takes me some time. Now, if I can automate it with a business product, it would be the number of hours that I've saved the business on producing that. So now I get an hourly rate. And then when I look at this one, which is attract new customers. So what I'm saying there is my data product will add more customers to your platform. Would create more customers. So my metric now is each. How many customers have I added? Okay. And JJ, I wanted to share this with you as well as a case of now I'm using the customer lifetime value in terms of saying, well, if I add one customer to you, what is the benefit to the organization? Okay, so what is your lifetime value in months? What's your average revenue? And then I come to a figure of this amount of money over here. And I then increase my cash flow. So what these are doing, this business process optimization, is improving my cash flow. And maybe just to go at the high level, the very first line is I've got so many units that I produced, number of competency hours. It cost me 100,000 Rand to set up all of this data product as a service. The cost of producing it is 71,000, and I'm getting 100,000 Rand in revenue on a monthly basis. So my cash flow is 31,800. Now, to generate a payback, you need to then suggest or to estimate what is your monthly increase or your period increase, be it a year or month, whatever that may be. What is my increase? And then how many periods is it going to take me to pay back? And what was my return on investment when I paid it back? And this one's easy for revenue generating, but when you're getting into cost reduction, I'm having to apply a different model. Okay, so in this case, I'm doing time saving, so I'm reducing my period costs. In this case, I'm adding revenue. So I'm adding new customers, so that means I've got a revenue addition here by doing this work. So each one has a different way of feeding into the calculations and affecting my most important figure, which is my cash flow. What is the cash flow for this? And this is what I do right in the beginning when I start. I build a cash flow of, it started off, I invested 100,000 Rand in my first period, my first year, or whatever it is. I got 31,000 Rand back. This is my annual increase. And so my balance after the end of the first year is I'm a minus 68,000. And you'll notice as we progress on year 3, we break even. And this is my payback period. So I'm sitting with that number of periods to be able to pay this back. And there's my ROI. And this is just a graph in which you'll probably sit with your finance officer to do this. And you probably won't even present this to the business unless someone asks, but you'd have to clarify this with the business, with the CFO, that you're not doing some weird stuff and being overly optimistic. Now, notice what I've done here is I've got the business case gives me the budgeted one, and the actual gives me what's actually happening. So after the 3 months that I've been operating at, these were my actual costs. Notice now that my period increase, or my increase, has now gone from 5%, which I estimated, to 1.7%. So I've got a slight problem. I'm actually operating at less than what I budgeted on my business case. Okay, and that's where these elements come in terms of I just wanted to show you now here, is when you have the KPIs that we spoke about. Remember all those KPIs. One of the important set of KPIs is this measuring the business case. So how effective was your business case? Okay, how effective are you contributing to the business strategy? Those are those KPIs. And then these are standard data value realization KPIs. So I've got a grouping of KPIs that I need to be able to put in place and collect data so that I can justify that I'm doing a good job and where we're sitting. Okay, and you'll notice that, for example, on my situation, in the first few months, I've actually been under by 3.23%. That's what my estimations were too high, and I'm actually bringing in a lot less. Okay, so that's the sort of what you need to do to understand your projected payback period. How many months am I getting? And then what's my return on investment? Okay, so just want to stop there. If there's anyone who'd like to ask a question about the calculations.
Howard, how long did it take you to build this?
It's taken me about a month now, Rob, in terms of when I started, and when I started trying to find ways of bringing down to my value measurement. And only once I saw that value taxonomy, and I realized, oh, shucks, now I know how to piece all of this stuff together. It's taken me about a month.
I'm totally blown away. Thank you.
JG, your comment on the FD, skeptical on efficiency gains from saving someone time, unless that's what's important here. So you'll notice here that I've got this concept of a unit dividend. Okay, so basically what I'm saying, JG, to talk to your point, is I need to reduce this by 140 hours before I can actually say, okay, this one person can now go and do some other work. Okay, so my time savings, what I did similarly with my competency hours, when I divide that by a number that's more marketable or more realistic, I'm doing the same with time savings. I only really want to register my time savings if I can almost reduce the head count. Does that answer your question, JG?
Yeah, absolutely, Howard. I mean, in my experience, this was an internal billing. It was trying to motivate a data product based on some of the efficiency gains, and the FD was like, well, unless that person is going to do something else, I'm not interested in this one. Yeah. So really important to sometimes batch the changes until you have it, and then you bring it through.
So that's where I've got a division of 140 basically I take the hours that I've saved and divide by 140, and that's really the hours that we can count.
Cool, thanks, Arjo.
What blew me away was that those 21 vectors, and I'll sort of start talking about it now. The 21 vectors that I've mentioned here on effectiveness, these different vectors, you're going to use a different pricing model and a different calculation formula. So time saving, oh, okay, I've got to then link it to a person, a head count. Okay, so there's time saving, and then there's attracting new customers. That's an each. So each one you have to work out how to bill it and how to bulk it or batch it, as you say, JG. And these are the important vectors that we should be working on. Okay, so how can you reduce risk for a company? How can you improve their efficiency, and how can you improve the success? Now, of course, you can use this in terms of when I use the jobs to be done. How long is it taking the customer to build a CV? Any of you guys around in terms of how long it takes you to create a CV? 3-4 hours, especially one that you're really concerned about. So that's the sort of saving that you get, and you'd need to be aware of that type of costing scenario. Okay, so here's what I was saying here.
Howard,
Yes,
Howard, maybe just an observation is that, so any project and engagement, if this is where you need to substantiate savings from, these data elements immediately become part of your project.
100%.
Because this is how you're going to have to substantiate value on it, so now.
JG, that was important here when we look at these data value chains. All right, when I look at my data value chain, there, can you see all the internal data? The metrics collection process.
Yeah, okay, so there's additional effort to not just get the data that you're going to build the product off, it's to get the data to substantiate
100%.
the value of the product. Got it. Okay, thank
100%. Yeah. And of course, you're going to be doing surveys, for example, on the quality of the data. So you can't always, when you're selling it to a consumer, you can't always say, all right, you're getting so much accuracy. I don't always know the accuracy. Okay, so yeah, Mark's saying he's got sort of 4 hours per year. So Mark, are you saying that you're almost doing 1 hour a CV, 1 hour a change? So the challenge I had, Mark, and I sort of used to do this as well. So I've got a log of all of the work that I'm doing, but when someone needs a specific role and you can play multiple roles, now I've got to divide that. Almost divide that. I can almost have a number of CVs according to the number of roles, and then the portfolios. So that's where some of my complications have come in terms of my CV, the work that I'm doing on my CV. Okay. All right, so those are the vectors. Then here's just giving you an understanding. For example, if it's improve the customer experience, meaning that you're making it more attractive to the customers, then you're looking at increased growth units, number of customers, or increase the customer value, the lifetime value. Those two. That's where you can be working on this thing. To improve a business process, you're reducing workload, measured in hours, dividend 1 month, one person 1 month, and opportunities is use case measurement. So how many new use cases have you brought onto the block since you started the game? Okay. All right, and then these would be the metrics that I use to actually measure how well this data value realization. I did want to share with you this one. I understand, or we understand there's how do we measure what I presented in terms of a business case. This one's important in terms of how do you link the data value to your business strategy. You can't ignore that. So what is your North Star? What is your one metric that matters? They're not the same as the business case, and they've got to be linked to the business. And then these ones are just basically applying to data value realization. So you've got these groupings of KPIs. It's not one set of KPIs. What I find has been tremendously helpful, and I'm sure you would have been asking some questions now. I wanted to just show you some of the problems that I have with this. this definition is they only start talking about KPIs at the end. But guys, I got to be planning for my KPIs up the front. Yeah. As JG just pointed out, where am I going to get the data? How am I going to measure it? What is the change and things like that? So be careful of then saying, all right, this is only priority 3. So this is where we have to be careful of getting to the priorities a bit late. There's my KPI and it's sitting at a priority 2. I should know about those KPIs up front. I shouldn't do the business justification without understanding the KPIs. Now, what I have included for you guys that you may find helpful is a cost-benefit analysis. I've got some calculations and spreadsheets here for you. I like this approach that the one accountant works on, and it's more from a project-based point of view in terms of what's your period of analysis, so how many years are you going to take to recover it, and then what are your options? And I like this one. Well, we can do nothing, and we're just going to stay here with our current costs, or we can do it in-house, or I can go out for an RFP to deliver me a data value realization, or I can go for open source. And one can look at these different approaches that we've got in there. Okay, what I wanted to just show you was now I start building my Power BI and my Excel spreadsheets on the pivot table to analyze the data, to show the KPIs, separating them in terms of revenue and cost. What I found interesting is that I battled to separate it. So I couldn't just do cost and just do revenue generation. Sometimes when I delivered a use case for revenue, I achieved the cost reduction. So I'm not sure how valid it is to have these two different, I think it's one registry, but different line items in the use case. Okay. And then I wanted to show you in terms of how would we build a roadmap. Well, the roadmap would look as follows, and especially for those that are from Saudi, these are the different data domains. Well, of course, we have to start with the data governance. We would build a data strategy first. We would do a maturity assessment. Then we would start looking at our value chain. And to do that, we would need the products from the BI and analytics, and we'd need the data architecture to define our data landscape. Once we've got that, we would start with our use case register, and there you can see the data value realization, the catalog, the data classification, the data quality, and open data. So once I've got the data value realization, I've now got a priority roadmap for all of my other domains that we need to produce. And once I've done that and the business has accepted it, I can now start to build the data as a service platform. And now we start delivering data operations, data sharing, reference data and master data, and data privacy. So this is the sort of roadmap that we would put forward to the business to say, guys, these are the steps that we would take to deliver this data value realization. Okay, and then another area on the charging model. What's important when you build a charging model is to do it by persona. Remember those free, paid, pro versions that you get on everybody? You'd have a feature list and a price. This is an example of my different personas. I've got a free version. If you want to do an assessment, fantastic. If you want to log your learning, great. It helps me. I can collect data about you and the industry. We got for data professionals. This is the feature list, and this is the price for data management service providers, features and price, and learning and development features and price. Okay, and this is sort of basically what we go through to build that entire data value realization framework. And any questions? I've sort of gone through it pretty quickly. Any questions, any observations?
Howard, I really like the last bit.
Sorry.
Yeah, I really like the last bit where you went into the price differentiation. So you would have the same product, but really for the different use cases that someone might have, you address this. That wasn't really clear in between, but I'm really happy that I see this here. That's really nice. Great.
Yeah, I mean, I also picked that up as whilst I was doing all these calculations, one had sort of forgotten about how you're gonna charge across your different customers and elements like that. Now, Eric, just to also share with you, one of the problems with payback period calculations is that you can have two types of payback periods. One is a standard percentage increase, and then one is either a diminishing increase or a ever increasing increase. And as you deliver more products, or as you deliver the same product to multiple personas, you could get more. You could have a higher than 5%. So you may need to do instead of being a fixed 5%, you may want to actually type in the values that you estimate you're going to get per year to your payback period. So different approaches that you can take to build your projected payback period.
Yeah, I can see the challenges around that. I got in touch with the data product. Actually, I helped the company to develop one on the technical side, like more than 5 years ago. It was click-based, based on internal data, enriched with market data classifications, and that was really interesting because we started to touch some of the aspects, but your whole framework here is way more comprehensive. Now, the interesting thing there was that we saw how it can scale, because essentially we just had to establish the product. The customers or the business partners of that company could subscribe to it. They could see their data in respect to other market participants, and anyone could join. So even if you're not actually a business partner of that company, it was in the trading aspect, but you're still interested in getting an overview of what is the growth dynamic and the market share that certain products or product groups have at the moment. That was really interesting, and that resonates back with the pyramid you showed earlier, from raw data provider up to insights, because that's something often discussed as well. Really interesting. So the question is, where can we get the deck?
We'll make it available soon afterwards. I'll put it on Google, and I'll share it, and then when Debbie's finishing the editing, you guys can have the deck.
Thanks. Cheers.
Alrighty. Rob, you have a question there?
Howard, I was particularly interested in that graph that you had of the payback period. So have you come across anything that says, for example, I know one particular organization that doesn't invest in anything that doesn't have a payback period in 24 months, for example. So yours said, no names, no backdrop. So yours said 36 months, which I presume was just illustrative.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I think there was a mistake there. There's my payback period of 2 months. So you can see the graph 1, 2, and negative. I'm going into payback period on 3.
Oh, wow. Okay. As an example. But if the payback period was outside the customer's investment period, is there stuff that can be done to actually realize value earlier?
Yeah. I think what one would have to look at is all of the different components. Is what is the revenue? What is my pricing model? Can I get a product saving in and come back to your data value chain, look at what are the jobs to be done, and basically say, well, did we underestimate the jobs to be done? Did we underestimate the value, or should we be charging more that we have within that? Now that's going to take market research and elements like that. I think what you also got then in terms of those business case options, Rob, is to say, could we deliver in-house? Do we need to go to the cloud? What's the cloud going to cost us? Could we go for open source data catalog? The sort of stuff that Don's done, and when he spoke of on Monday on how able he was to almost recreate almost 81,000 time series within a space of 4 or 5 months. And it's those type of options that you can put together to get the impact that you need.
Thanks.
This one is a lot more detailed, so that is in there, Robin, just to show you in terms of the cost benefit analysis. These are the type of things that you're going to have to be looking at: internal staff, hardware maintenance, and then look at where this thing's going wrong to be able to get you the right numbers that you're looking at.
So with the knowledge that you have, there's quite likely a use case that has generic benefit for customers.
Oh, that's a good point. And what I am finding was that, especially within the sort of Saudi type of situation, you're saying, oh, okay, now let's all of them have to make their detailed data open and then aggregated and then recommendations. So, for example, I'm finding recommendations that a lot of them can be providing recommendations because they've got so much information about what's going on around them that they can now provide a service to external people or internal people saying, oh, I want to buy a factory or I want to set up shop in this city. What's the cost? What are the potential fees and stuff like that? Now you're getting into some form of recommendation engine that they can give you tremendous insight. Of course, the underlying data is all open, but that extra aggregation and extra analysis is something that they all can do.
Thank you.
So I think there are patterns in terms of that. I think I know when we spoke to JG in terms of his ESG, we find a similar thing. He has the open data, the data that his customers send. He can then just augment that with metadata tags. His very first deliverable is the detailed data, but then he can put ESG tags onto the data and send it back to him. And he's got a product. Then when you aggregate it, you can then start comparing yourself to a comparison thing. How well are you doing in the industry? And elements like that lots of people are interested in. All righty. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Thanks for everything, and I'll share it with you. And of course, if we have any comments or anything like that, love to support you.
Great series. Thank you
Thanks,
so
Howard.
much.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks again, Howard.
Yeah, great.